I came to fix a flickering light in her bookstore, just a favor for a family friend. But when Sarah's hand brushed mine and lingered, something shifted, something forbidden. What she whispered next would haunt me every night after. I never imagined a wedding could feel like standing on the brink of an abyss, teetering between the familiar and the unknown. My name is Harlan Voss, and at 23, I was still navigating the choppy waters of adulthood, punching the clock as a junior mechanic at Iron Ridge Auto, a gritty little garage on the edge of Bellingham, Washington, where the smell of motor oil clung to everything like a second skin. The place sat on a forgotten stretch of Meridian Street, surrounded by chain-link fences and stacks of rusted parts, and it was my world. Long shifts under hoods, dreaming of one day running my own shop, but mostly just scraping by. That night, I was headed to my cousin Elias Thorne's wedding, tying the knot with his high school sweetheart at Willow Creek Lodge, a rustic spot hidden in the Cascade Mountains foothills. The drive up was through winding roads slick with recent rain, the pine trees whispering secrets as I pulled in late, straight from work, my hands still raw from scrubbing away the grease. The ceremony had wrapped up by the time I arrived, and the reception was alive with energy, laughter bouncing off the log cabin walls, glasses clinking in toasts, and a jazz band weaving melodies into the cool evening air. String lights dangled overhead like captured fireflies, casting a golden glow over the wooden dance floor where couples swayed. I felt out of place in my borrowed suit, the fabric pulling tight across my shoulders, a reminder that I wasn't built for these formal affairs. I scanned the room for family, spotting my aunt chatting in a corner, but then my gaze locked on her. Seraphina Langford, or Sarah, as everyone called her, Elias's aunt from the bride's side. I'd met her once before at a family gathering, but she lingered in my memory like an unfinished thought. Recently widowed after a tragic car accident that claimed her husband 2 years prior, she carried herself with a quiet resilience that drew you in without effort. She stood by the bar, cradling a glass of red wine, her dark hair falling in soft waves over a midnight blue dress that accentuated her form in a way that was elegant, not overt. She had to be around 38 or 40. Her presence radiated the kind of maturity that comes from weathering life's storms, with faint lines around her eyes that hinted at both joy and sorrow. There was a depth to her, a subtle allure in her movements, like she held stories I could only guess at. I wasn't planning on staying long. Grab a drink, offer congratulations, slip out before the night dragged on. But as I approached the bar, our eyes met through the throng of guests, her hazel gaze catching the light like amber, and for a heartbeat, the room's chaos dulled to a murmur. "Harlan, isn't it?" she said, her voice smooth and inviting, like a warm current cutting through the noise. She offered her hand, and I took it, feeling the cool, soft press of her skin against my rough palm, a contrast that sent an unexpected shiver up my arm. "Yeah, that's me. Sarah, it's good to see you again." I aimed for casual, but my heart betrayed me with a quicker rhythm. Up close she was captivating, her perfume a delicate blend of vanilla and jasmine, faint but lingering, pulling me in despite myself. We fell into easy conversation about the wedding, how radiant the bride looked in her lace gown, how Elias had fumbled his vows with nervous charm. It was the sort of polite exchange that fills gaps at family events, but beneath it, I sensed something more. A subtle undercurrent I couldn't pinpoint. The band transitioned to a slower number, and pairs began drifting to the dance floor. Dancing wasn't my strength. My rhythm was better suited to turning wrenches than gliding across wood. I was about to make my excuses when she placed her glass down and tilted her head toward the music. "Would you dance with me?" she asked, her tone light yet laced with an invitation that felt heavier than words. I paused, caught off guard. "I'm not much of a dancer," I confessed, rubbing the back of my neck, feeling the heat rise there. "I'd probably step on your toes." Her smile was genuine, crinkling the corners of her eyes. "I'm out of practice myself." "Just one song. Humor me." Before I could overthink it, her hand was in mine, guiding me out. The floor gleamed under our feet, smooth and inviting, and as we positioned ourselves, her hand rested on my shoulder while I tentatively placed mine on her waist. The fabric of her dress was soft, warm from her body, and we began to move. Clumsy at first, me apologizing after a misstep, her laughter light and forgiving. "Relax, Harlan," she murmured. "It's not about perfection." As the melody unfolded, the awkwardness melted away, our steps aligning in a natural flow. Her breath grazed my collar, steady and close, and I became acutely aware of her proximity. The curve of her back under my hand, the way her body moved with mine. She was taller in her heels, nearly eye to eye, and it felt intimate, almost too much for a casual dance. We talked quietly about my latest project at the garage, resuscitating an old Mustang that had seen better days, about her bookstore, evergreen pages on Holly Street, a haven of rare books and quiet corners where she found solace. "It's my escape," she said, her voice softening. "After everything, it grounds me." I listened, nodding, careful not to pry into her loss. Whispers from family painted the picture. Her husband, Victor, a beloved professor, taken in a senseless crash on a storm-slicked road. Instead, I opened up about my own uncertainties, leaving community college behind for the garage life, the family pressure to settle into something stable. She absorbed every word, her gaze unwavering, making me feel truly heard for the first time in ages, like my ramblings mattered. The song faded, but another swelled in its place, a gentle waltz. I expected her to step back, but she lingered. "One more?" she whispered, her eyes holding mine with a quiet intensity. "Sure," I replied, my throat tightening. This dance felt different, our bodies closer, her hand gripping my shoulder a bit firmer. I inhaled her scent, committing it to memory, the pull between us growing undeniable. Around us, the wedding pulsed with life. Children darting between tables, elders raising glasses, the bride and groom lost in their bliss. But in our small space, it was isolated, charged. Then, as the music crested, she leaned in, her lips brushing near my ear. "Dance only with me tonight, Harlan," she breathed, her words a velvet plea that carried vulnerability I hadn't anticipated. My pulse thundered. Why me? What did this mean? I didn't voice it. I just nodded, drawing her closer, the world narrowing to the rhythm of our steps. We swayed through 2 more songs, delving deeper, her tales of youthful adventures backpacking across Europe, hostels in Prague and Lisbon, where freedom tasted like possibility. "I was so unburdened then," she said, a hint of longing in her tone. I shared my road trip fantasies, cruising the Pacific Coast Highway, wrench in hand for whatever broke down. Her laughter rang true, easing the tension, but also heightening it. As the evening progressed, I caught the sidelong glances. My aunt murmuring to a relative, Elias flashing a puzzled look our way. Sarah noticed too, her posture shifting slightly during a musical pause. "I should circulate," she said, though her eyes clung to mine, reluctant. "Yeah, same here." But we stood frozen, the air thick with unspoken words, a magnetic pull refusing to release. She finally moved to greet the newlyweds, and I retreated to the bar for water, her whisper echoing in my mind. "Dance only with me." It felt like a vow I hadn't sought but couldn't ignore. I watched her navigate the crowd, her grace effortless, yet she glanced back at me repeatedly, each look a spark igniting something deep within. The night unfolded with speeches and cake, me half engaging with cousins, my focus fracturing toward her. At one point, she stood solitary by the dance floor's edge, gazing into the shadowed woods through the lodge windows, her silhouette etched in light. I approached without planning. "You all right?" She turned, her features softening. "Just reflecting. Weddings stir up so much. Joys and aches alike." "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "Must be tough." She shrugged, but her eyes shimmered. "It is, but we push forward, finding light in unexpected places, like a simple dance." We slipped outside onto the deck, the creek murmuring below, stars piercing the velvet sky. The chill nipped at us, but the solitude was welcome. "Victor and I wed in a spot like this," she confided softly, "surrounded by nature's quiet strength." I stayed silent, offering presence over words. The party hummed distantly behind us as we leaned on the railing, the moment stretching, intimate, yet fraught. She, a woman marked by loss. Me, too young to fully grasp it, yet drawn inexorably. Back inside, the band called for final tunes. She found me again, hand extended. "Last dance?" I took it, our bodies aligning seamlessly now, her head briefly on my shoulder, a sigh escaping her. The closeness was electric, questions swirling unspoken. As guests departed, I offered to escort her to her car in the gravel lot. The path was dimly lit, our footsteps crunching in unison. At her gray Audi, she faced me. "Thank you for tonight, Harlan. It touched me more than you realize." "Any time," I said, voice low. She hesitated, keys in hand, the space between us humming with potential. Then she hugged me, firm, lingering, her cheek against mine. "Drive carefully," she whispered. I watched her taillights vanish into the night, then climbed into my truck, heading to my apartment on Cornwall Avenue, the encounter replaying endlessly. Something had ignited, something I wasn't prepared for, pulling me toward an uncertain edge. This was only the beginning. But he didn't know yet how quickly things could spiral out of control. The morning after the wedding, I woke to the faint hum of Bellingham stirring outside my apartment window on Cornwall Avenue. The place was a modest one-bedroom, cluttered with second-hand furniture, a sagging couch, a coffee table scarred with mug rings, and a coffee maker that groaned like it resented being used. Sunlight sliced through the blinds, painting jagged lines across the hardwood floor, and I lay there, the memory of Sarah's voice. "Dance only with me," looping in my head like a song stuck on repeat. I was 23, still piecing together what it meant to be a man, working long hours at Iron Ridge Auto, where the scent of oil and metal was as familiar as my own skin. My plan for the day was simple: brew coffee, hit the trails at Watcom Falls Park for a run, maybe tinker with the carburetor on my beat-up pickup. But before I could even pour a cup, my phone buzzed on the nightstand, cutting through the quiet. It was a text from an unknown number. "Harlan, it's Sarah. Got your number from Elias. I need a favor. Can you stop by the bookstore today? Something's up with the wiring, and I'd rather not call an electrician just yet." My heart kicked up a gear, the wedding's haze snapping into sharp reality. She was reaching out, pulling me back into her world, and the thought made my hands unsteady as I typed back, "Sure, I'll swing by. What time?" Her reply was instant. "Noon? Evergreen Pages, 112 Holly Street." "Thanks." I spent the next hour pacing, trying to shake the nervous energy. By 11:30, I was in my truck, toolbox rattling in the bed, navigating the quiet streets of Bellingham. Holly Street was alive with the charm of small-town America. Brick storefronts, chalkboard signs outside cafes, and pedestrians carrying to-go cups. Evergreen Pages stood out, its forest green awning shading a window display of leather-bound books arranged around a vintage typewriter, like an invitation to step back in time. The bell above the door jingled as I entered, the air inside thick with the scent of aged paper and polished wood. Shelves towered to the ceiling, stuffed with everything from rare first editions to dog-eared paperbacks, and a cozy reading nook in the corner beckoned with plush armchairs and a hand-woven rug. Sarah was behind the counter, sorting receipts, her dark hair pulled into a loose bun that let a few strands frame her face. She wore a cream sweater and jeans, the kind of effortless elegance that made you forget she was probably pushing 40. Her poise carried the weight of years. Years I hadn't lived, marked by losses I could only imagine. When she saw me, her face brightened, but there was a flicker of something else. Uncertainty, maybe, or anticipation. "Harlan, you're a lifesaver," she said, stepping around the counter, her voice warm but tinged with something I couldn't place. "No big deal," I said, setting my toolbox down, trying to keep my cool despite the way my pulse quickened. "What's the issue?" "The lights in the back room keep flickering." "Probably the wiring, but I'm no expert." She gestured toward a curtained doorway, leading me to a cramped storage room packed with cardboard boxes and a rickety table. A single bulb swung from the ceiling, flickering like it was gasping for life. I grabbed a stepladder she'd set up and climbed, inspecting the fixture while she stood below, her presence a quiet distraction. Her breathing was soft, steady, but I felt her watching me, her gaze like a weight I couldn't ignore. "You do this a lot?" she asked, her tone light, almost teasing. "Fix lights? Not really. Cars are more my thing, but wiring's all the same puzzle." I glanced down, catching her smile, small but genuine. "This place give you a lot of trouble?" "Not usually. It's old, though, 1920s. Things wear out when you're not looking." Her voice had a wistful edge, like she was talking about more than just the building. I focused on the wires, finding a loose connection that took only a quick twist of my pliers to fix. The light steadied, casting a warm glow over the room. "That should do it," I said, stepping down. But my boot caught on the ladder's edge, and I stumbled. Her hand shot out, grabbing my arm to steady me, her grip firm and warm. The touch lingered, her fingers resting on my sleeve, and for a moment, neither of us moved. My face heated, and I muttered a quick, "Thanks." "Careful," she said softly, her hazel eyes locking with mine, searching for something. Then she let go, stepping back, clearing her throat. "Coffee? I owe you." I followed her to a tiny kitchenette tucked behind the shop, where she poured 2 mugs from a weathered coffee pot, the kind that looked like it had brewed 1,000 mornings. We sat at a small table by a window, sunlight spilling across her face, highlighting the fine lines that only made her more striking. She was definitely in her late 30s, maybe early 40s. Her grace spoke of a life lived deeply, of joys and wounds I could only guess at. We talked about the bookstore, how she'd opened it after Victor's death to anchor herself. "Books don't ask questions," she said, her voice low. "They just wait for you to need them." I opened up about my own life, growing up in Everson, a speck of a town nearby, where my dad, a logger with hands like sandpaper, taught me to fix anything that broke. He used to say, "If you can't build it or break it, you don't get it." I chuckled, but her laugh was warmer, like a gift. "Your dad sounds like he knew what mattered," she said, her eyes softening. The conversation flowed, but there was a charge beneath it, sharper than at the wedding. Maybe it was the quiet of the bookstore, the absence of a crowd, just us in this small space. Her fingers brushed mine as she reached for her mug, and neither of us pulled away. It was nothing, just a graze, but it sent a current through me, electric and unsettling. The bell jingled, breaking the moment, and an older woman entered, asking about a rare poetry collection. Sarah excused herself, slipping into shopkeeper mode, her voice bright as she guided the customer to a shelf. I stayed put, pretending to check my toolbox, but really watching her, the way she moved with confidence, recommending books with a passion that lit her up. When the customer left, she leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "You don't have to stay," she said, but her tone suggested she hoped I would. No rush, I replied, meeting her gaze. Her eyes held mine, and for a second, the world stopped. I wanted to say something to bridge the gap, but the words stuck, heavy in my throat. She spoke first. You surprised me last night. You're a better dancer than you let on. I grinned, trying to lighten the mood. You weren't half bad either. Thought you said you were rusty. I am. But you made it feel easy. Her voice softened, and she looked away, like she'd revealed too much. The afternoon blurred by. I helped her shift heavy boxes for a new display, our hands brushing as we passed books, each touch a spark that felt both accidental and deliberate. We talked about everything. Her love for jazz, my obsession with old cars, the best trails around Mount Baker. She mentioned a clearing by the Nooksack River, a secret spot where she'd go to clear her mind. Maybe I'll show you sometime, she said, then added quickly, if you're into hiking. I could get into it, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. By the time I left, the sun was dipping low, painting the bay in shades of gold. She walked me to the door, her hand lingering on the frame. Thanks for the help, Harlan. I mean it. Any time, I echoed, the word carrying more weight than I intended. Her smile was soft, but there was a shadow in her eyes, something heavy, unspoken. Driving home, her presence clung to me, her words a melody I couldn't shake. The next few days were a grind at the garage, oil changes, brake jobs, the usual, but she texted again, late one night. Lights flickering again. Can you take a look? I was there the next morning, toolbox in hand, feeling less like a stranger. The fix was minor, a frayed wire, but it was an excuse to linger. Over coffee, she shared more about her past, teaching literature in Seattle, the weight of leaving it behind after Victor. The bookstore's quieter, she said. Safer. You ever think about going back? I asked, sensing the depth behind her words. Sometimes. But I'm not her anymore. Her eyes were distant, carrying years I couldn't touch. I wanted to ask more, but held back, letting the silence speak. We found reasons to keep crossing paths. A loose shelf, a stuck window. Each visit stretched longer, coffee turning into hours of stories, her showing me a rare edition of Wuthering Heights, me recounting the time I rebuilt a transmission in a snowstorm. It wasn't flirting, not exactly. It was deeper, like we were circling something we couldn't name. One evening I stopped by after closing to help with a book delivery. The shop was dark, lit only by a single lamp casting golden shadows over the shelves. We worked side by side, stacking boxes in the tight storage room, our shoulders brushing, the air thick with quiet tension. When we finished, she pulled out a bottle of red wine from a drawer. To surviving another day, she said, pouring 2 glasses, her smile both weary and warm. We sat on the floor leaning against a bookshelf, the wine loosening our tongues. She spoke of Victor, not his death, but the small things, his off-key humming in the kitchen, the notes he'd tuck into her books. I shared about my mom, gone since I was 10, and how I kept her recipe cards in a drawer, unable to cook from them but unable to let them go. The air grew heavy, intimate, like we were peeling back layers we hadn't meant to share. Then, abruptly, she set her glass down, her eyes intense. Harlan, why do you keep coming back? My heart stopped. Because you asked me to, I said, but it wasn't the whole truth, and her gaze called my bluff. She leaned closer, her voice a whisper. And if I hadn't? I swallowed, the space between us shrinking. I'd still be here. Her breath hitched, and for a moment I thought she'd close the distance. But she stood suddenly, breaking the spell. It's late. You should go. I nodded, grabbing my jacket, the air thick with what we didn't say. At the door, Her hand grazed my arm. "See you soon?" "Yeah," I said, my voice rough. "Soon." Driving home, her question burned in my mind. Why did I keep coming back? I didn't have an answer, but I knew stopping wasn't an option. The days following that charged evening in the bookstore stretched like a wire pulled taut, ready to snap at any moment. I couldn't shake Sarah from my thoughts, her intense gaze, the whisper of her question echoing in the quiet corners of my mind. Why do you keep coming back? At 23, I was still carving out my place in the world, clocking in at Iron Ridge Auto where the grind of engines and the sting of grease defined my days. But now every idle moment pulled me back to her. She was Elias's aunt, a widow carrying the scars of a life I could barely fathom, older by a span that made everything feel off-limits, yet the pull was undeniable, a quiet force drawing me in despite the warnings in my head. It was a Thursday when her next text arrived, shifting everything into sharper focus. "Harlan, I'm heading to that clearing by the Nooksack River tomorrow. Want to come? I could use the company." No pretense of fixes or favors this time, just a raw invitation that made my hands tremble as I replied, "Sounds good. What time?" Her response? 10 a.m. Meet me at the bookstore. Bring comfortable shoes. Sleep evaded me that night, my mind tangled in possibilities. Was this just a hike? A friendly outing? Or the edge of something deeper? I tossed in my narrow bed, the apartment's thin walls letting in the distant hum of traffic on Cornwall Avenue, amplifying the uncertainty. The next morning, I dressed simply. Jeans, a faded flannel shirt, my worn hiking boots, and drove to Evergreen Pages, the air crisp with the promise of autumn creeping in. Sarah waited outside, leaning against her gray Audi, clad in a lightweight jacket, cargo pants, and a scarf that caught the breeze like a flag of surrender. In the daylight, she appeared almost younger, perhaps mid-30s if you didn't look too closely, but her steady gaze and the subtle lines of experience revealed the truth. She was in her early 40s, a woman shaped by time and trials I hadn't faced. "Ready for a bit of adventure?" she asked, her smile warm, yet edged with caution, as if she too felt the weight of this step. "Always," I said, forcing a casual tone, though my heart beat unevenly. We climbed into her car, the radio murmuring soft folk tunes as we navigated the winding roads flanked by dense forests, the Cascade Mountains looming like silent guardians. The clearing was tucked off a gravel path, concealed by towering pines that rustled in the wind. We parked at the trailhead, marked by a faded sign for Silver Creek Trail, the air alive with the scent of damp earth, cedar, and the faint rush of the river ahead. She led the way down the narrow path, her strides confident, as if this route was etched into her soul. "This spot pulled me through after Victor," she said after a stretch of silence, her voice blending with the crunch of leaves underfoot. "When the world felt too heavy, I'd come here, sit by the water, and just let it all fade for a while." I nodded, words failing me as I took in the surroundings, the sunlight filtering through branches, casting dancing shadows on the ground. "It's got a peace to it," I managed, watching how the light played across her face, highlighting the quiet strength she carried. We emerged into the clearing, a serene, grassy expanse where the Nooksack River broadened, its waters sparkling like shattered glass under the sun. A massive fallen log served as a makeshift bench, and we settled there, our shoulders close enough to feel the warmth, but not quite touching. She unpacked a thermos of coffee and 2 sturdy metal mugs, pouring with steady hands, the steam rising like a veil between us. The heat of the mugs seeped into my palms, grounding me amid the pounding of my heart. Being here, isolated with her, felt like stepping over an invisible threshold, the kind you can't uncross without consequence. We talked for what felt like hours, the conversation weaving through layers we hadn't touched before. Her passion for books like the remains of the day. How its themes of unspoken regrets mirrored fragments of her own life. I shared my ambitions for the garage, not just repairs, but restoring vintage cars, breathing life back into forgotten machines. "You've got a solid heart, Harlan," she said, her voice low and sincere. "Hold on to that. Don't let the years wear it down." Her words landed like a quiet blow, stirring something deep. I studied her then, truly, the way her hazel eyes caught the sunlight, the faint scar tracing her eyebrow, the subtle curve of her lips when she paused in thought. She was beautiful in a way that went beyond surface, shaped by years of living, loving, and losing. I wanted to take her hand, to bridge the space, but hesitation held me back. Instead, I asked, "What do you want, Sarah?" "Not the shop, not the memories. What do you really want right now?" She stilled, her mug suspended midway, her expression shifting to one of raw vulnerability. For a long moment, silence hung between us, broken only by the river's steady flow. Then she set the mug down, her hands trembling just enough to notice. "I don't know anymore," she whispered, her voice cracking slightly. "I thought I had it figured out. But being near you makes everything feel tangled." My breath caught in my chest. "Tangled how?" She turned her gaze to the river, her jaw tightening as if wrestling with the words. "You're young, Harlan. Your life's just unfolding. And me? I'm not supposed to feel this pull, this awakening." "Awakening to what?" I pressed, my voice barely holding steady, the air thickening around us. She met my eyes again, unguarded now, the depth of her gaze pulling me in. To feeling alive, to wanting someone, something real, after so long. The confession hung there, heavy and true, shifting the ground beneath us. I reached out, my hand covering hers on the log, her skin warm and soft, her fingers curling instinctively into mine. Neither of us withdrew. The contact was electric, a silent acknowledgement of the line we were towing. "Sarah," I said, my voice rough with emotion. "I don't have all the answers either. But this feeling, it's real for me too." She didn't respond immediately, her eyes searching mine as if hunting for doubt or deception. Then slowly, she leaned forward, her forehead pressing gently against mine. Her breath was warm, uneven, mingling with my own, and in that suspended moment, the world dissolved, the river's murmur, the rustling leaves, all fading to the rhythm of our shared silence. I ached to kiss her, to close the final gap, but a mix of fear and respect held me still, aware of the fragility, the years between us making every action feel monumental. "I shouldn't be doing this," she murmured, her words a breath against my skin, but she didn't pull away. "Then stop," I whispered back, though every fiber of me hoped she wouldn't. She eased back slightly, her hands still entwined with mine. "You're too young for someone like me, for this kind of mess." "I'm not some kid," I said, a edge creeping into my tone, firmer than intended. "I know what I'm feeling, even if it scares me." Her smile was bittersweet, laced with sadness. "And that's exactly what terrifies me most." We sat in that heavy quiet, the moment drawing out like a held breath. Eventually, she rose, dusting off her pants, breaking the spell. "We should start back." The return hike was subdued, the air between us dense with unspoken words, the path seeming longer under the weight of it all. In the car, she drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting near mine on the console. Close, but not quite connecting, a metaphor for everything unsaid. Back at the bookstore, I retrieved my jacket from her passenger seat, ready to head out. But she halted me at the door, her expression a storm of conflict. Harlan, she said, her voice low and steady, I don't know where this leads, but I don't want you disappearing from my days. My chest tightened, hope and fear colliding. I'm not going anywhere. She stepped closer, her fingers brushing my cheek lightly, sending a shiver through me. Then, in a rush, she leaned in and kissed me. Soft, tentative, like testing fragile ice. The world tilted, my heart slamming as the kiss lingered just long enough to imprint itself. But she drew back abruptly, her eyes wide with regret or fear, or maybe both. I'm sorry, she whispered, her hand dropping. I had no right. Don't say that, I interrupted, my voice thick. Don't apologize for something real. She nodded, lips pressed into a thin line, her composure cracking. Go home, Harlan. I need time to sort this out. I drove back to Cornwall Avenue, the kiss burning on my lips like a brand, a mix of promise and peril. I didn't know her next move, but I'd wait. Days, weeks, if needed. This had altered me, pushed me beyond the mechanic fixing engines. I'd tasted something profound, worth the risk, even if it shattered everything. The following week dragged without a word from her. No texts, no calls, the silence a gnawing void. I swung by the bookstore once, but the door was locked, a handwritten sign reading, "Back in a few days." My gut twisted, doubts flooding in. Had I overstepped? Did she regret that kiss, see me as just a foolish kid? But on the 8th day, my phone lit up with a message. Clearing tomorrow, 10 a.m. Please come. I arrived at the trailhead, the same knot of nerves twisting inside. She was already there, perched on the log by the river, her hair loose and windswept, her face softer than I'd ever seen, as if the time apart had stripped away some armor. She stood as I approached, her hands fidgeting, betraying her calm facade. I've been thinking, she said, her voice steady but laced with vulnerability, about you, about whatever this is between us. I closed the distance, my heart pounding. And what did you decide? She drew a deep breath, her eyes locking onto mine with unwavering intensity. I'm afraid, Harlan, of what this could